Most military bases have fences, guards, and a sign that says, "Stay out." Some places on this planet have taken those basic ideas and built something considerably more serious around them. The locations on this list are protected in ways that make a standard military perimeter look like a suggestion. These are 15 places on Earth guarded more than military bases. Number 15, Bahnhof Underground Data Center, Stockholm, Sweden. Buried 50 feet beneath the streets of Stockholm, inside a former Cold War nuclear bunker carved directly into granite bedrock, is a commercial data center that has made physical security its primary architectural feature. The Bahnhof Data Center, operated by Swedish internet service provider Bahnhof AB, occupies a facility originally built by the Swedish military in the 1940s to withstand a direct nuclear strike, and the company has leaned into that heritage with considerable enthusiasm. The entrance to the facility requires passing through a half-meter thick steel door of the kind typically associated with bank vaults. Inside, the aesthetic is deliberately cinematic. Waterfalls, simulated daylight, plants, and design elements that Bahnhof's CEO John Carlung has described as inspired by the set design of James Bond villain Lairs, which is an unusual marketing strategy that nonetheless communicates the general vibe accurately. The facility has its own backup power supply capable of sustaining operations for extended periods, its own water cooling system drawn from a subterranean reservoir, and security protocols that the company does not publish in detail for what should be obvious reasons. The facility gained international attention when WikiLeaks began using Bahnhof as one of its hosting providers, a fact that raised both the profile of the data center and the intensity of the security questions around it. Swedish law provides strong protections for data hosted within its jurisdiction, and the physical security of the bunker complements the legal protection in a way that made it attractive for organizations with high-sensitivity hosting needs. The combination of granite bedrock, Cold War construction standards, and modern security infrastructure produces something that most conventional military installations would consider very respectable. Number 14. Bank of England Gold Vault, London, England. The Bank of England's Gold Vault sits beneath Threadneedle Street in the City of London, and it holds approximately 400,000 gold bars belonging to the Bank of England itself and to foreign central banks and governments who store their reserves there, making it the second largest gold repository in the world after the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The vault occupies a floor area roughly equivalent to a third of a square mile beneath the streets of one of the world's busiest financial districts, and the bank has occupied the site since 1734. Access to the vault requires passing through a series of security measures that the bank does not describe publicly in detail, though accounts from journalists given supervised visits have mentioned voice recognition, 3-foot-thick walls, and time locks that prevent access regardless of who requests it at certain hours. The keys to certain vault sections are reportedly several feet long, purpose-built for locks that were designed with the specific intention of making unauthorized duplication effectively impossible with any technology likely to have existed since the vault was constructed. Former Bank of England Governor Eddie George once noted that the security measures around the gold vault were designed on the assumption that the threat would evolve, which is a polite way of saying the bank has spent 2.5 centuries thinking about people trying to steal gold and has acted accordingly. The vault is monitored by the bank's own security force, which operates independently of both the City of London Police and the Metropolitan Police, giving it a layer of institutional self-sufficiency that most government buildings in Britain lack. The vault has never been robbed, which, given its location in a major city for over 2 centuries, is either a testament to the security or a testament to the gold's weight. Number 13. Tuman River Border, North Korea, China, Russia. The Tuman River forms a small section of the border between North Korea, China, and Russia, and the North Korean side of that river is one of the most comprehensively militarized border zones on Earth, heavily enough that it arguably belongs in a different category from any conventional military installation it might be compared to. The border includes electrified fencing in certain sections, motion sensors, tripwires, regular armed patrol, watchtowers with overlapping fields of observation, and in some areas, active landmine placement. Despite all of that, the Tuman River border is also the most commonly used crossing point for North Koreans attempting to defect, primarily because the river is narrow enough in certain sections, sometimes only a few dozen meters, that a determined swimmer can cross it, and because the guards on the Chinese side are susceptible to bribes in ways that the North Korean system discourages but cannot entirely prevent. The tension between the scale of the security infrastructure and the continued use of the border as an escape route has made the Tuman region the subject of extensive documentation by defector organizations and human rights investigators. The Chinese side of the border is monitored by People's Liberation Army units and Chinese border police, and China has a formal agreement with North Korea to return defectors who are caught on the Chinese side, which means the border functions as a two-sided security apparatus against the same population. Human rights organizations, including Human Rights Watch, have documented the conditions along the border and the treatment of captured defectors at length. The security is real, the consequences are severe, and people still try to cross. That combination tells you most of what you need to know about both the border and the conditions on the other side of it. Number 12. The Mormon Church Historical Vault, Little Cottonwood Canyon, Utah. Inside a cliff face in Little Cottonwood Canyon in the Wasatch Range of Utah, about 20 miles southeast of Salt Lake City, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints maintains one of the most extensive private genealogical and historical archives in the world. The Granite Mountain Records Vault, that's the actual name, was excavated directly into the granite of the Wasatch Range beginning in 1965, cutting 6 tunnels into the mountain to house temperature and humidity-controlled storage for microfilm, digital files, and original records accumulated through the church's decades-long program of genealogical documentation. The vault holds an estimated 3 billion names and associated records collected from church registries, civil records, and historical archives from dozens of countries over more than a century of systematic data gathering. The church's genealogical program is the most comprehensive private historical record-gathering effort in human history, and the vault is where the physical backups of that effort are maintained. The tunnels are sealed with 14-ton doors, the interior temperature is controlled to preservation standards, and the access protocols are substantially more involved than dropping by during office hours. The facility is not open to the public, and the church does not publicize detailed information about its security measures, though the nature of the installation, 14-ton doors, solid granite on all sides, an institutional client with very long institutional memory and significant financial resources, communicates the general approach clearly enough. The church makes much of the genealogical data accessible through its family search platform, but the physical vault and its contents are maintained entirely outside public access and have been since the first tunnels opened in 1965. Number 11. Svalbard Treaty Territories, Norway. The Svalbard archipelago occupies a peculiar legal position. It is Norwegian sovereign territory under the 1920 Svalbard Treaty, but citizens of any of the 46 signatory nations have the right to live and work there without a visa, subject to Norwegian law. The archipelago sits in the high Arctic, about 800 miles from the North Pole, and its combination of sovereignty, treaty obligations, and extreme geography creates a border situation unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. The Norwegian government manages access through the practical constraint that getting to Svalbard requires flying into Longyearbyen, the only community with an international airport, and the island's extreme environment creates natural barriers no fence or patrol could replicate. The winter is months of continuous darkness with temperatures that make outdoor exposure genuinely dangerous, and anyone traveling outside settled areas is required by Norwegian regulation to carry a firearm as protection against polar bears, a restriction enforced by the governor's office. The places within Svalbard receiving the most intensive oversight are the Russian research stations, particularly Barentsburg, home to 300 to 500 people and one of the largest Russian settlements outside Russia itself. The Norwegian government monitors it with the attention you would expect, given that it represents a functioning Russian community on an island 800 miles from the North Pole. The overall security model for Svalbard is unusual. Geography and weather do most of the work, which is arguably more effective than anything that could be constructed. Number 10. Negev Nuclear Research Center, Israel. The Negev Nuclear Research Center near the town of Dimona in southern Israel is one of the worst-kept secrets in international nuclear policy, a facility that the Israeli government has never officially confirmed as a nuclear weapons production site, while simultaneously not denying it with any real conviction for over 60 years. The center was built in the late 1950s with French assistance, and its existence was first publicly disclosed when photographs were published in 1986 by a former Israeli nuclear technician named Mordechai Vanunu, who was subsequently kidnapped by Mossad agents in Rome, brought back to Israel, tried in closed proceedings, and sentenced to 18 years in prison, 11 of them in solitary confinement. The facility is protected by layers of security that the Israeli military and intelligence services manage without ever discussing publicly, including restricted airspace over the site, ground perimeter defenses, and the general deterrent effect of being protected by an intelligence agency with a documented history of responding vigorously to threats against Israeli security infrastructure. The airspace restriction has been enforced, aircraft that have strayed into it have been intercepted promptly. Israeli policy of deliberate ambiguity on nuclear capabilities, what scholars of international security call nuclear opacity, means that neither the existence of weapons at the Negev facility nor the details of its security have ever been officially confirmed. What can be confirmed is that the facility exists, that Israel takes its security with extreme seriousness, and that the one person who told the world what he saw inside paid a substantial personal price for doing so. The combination of physical security and institutional deterrence makes it one of the more comprehensively protected facilities on Earth, regardless of what's officially acknowledged to be inside. Number 9. Global Seed Vault Administrative Zone, Longyearbyen, Norway. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault has been mentioned in prior contexts, but the administrative and regulatory zone around it, the specific protocols governing who can authorize access, how deposits and withdrawals are processed, and what security verification is required at each stage, is worth examining separately from the physical structure. The vault was designed from the outset to be as close to self-maintaining as possible, which means the security architecture is built into the physical environment rather than depending on a large security force that would itself need to be maintained and funded. The vault sits inside Plateauberget Mountain, about 130 meters above sea level and roughly 1,300 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. The permafrost surrounding the vault provides passive cooling that maintains seed viability even if active refrigeration systems fail. The entrance corridor is designed to allow water from any permafrost thaw to drain away from the storage chambers rather than into them, a lesson learned when unusual warming caused some water infiltration in the entrance tunnel in 2017. The seeds themselves were not affected, but the incident prompted infrastructure improvements. The institutions that deposit seeds retain ownership and control of their deposits, with the Global Crop Diversity Trust and the Norwegian government providing oversight and administration. The security at the vault entrance includes electronic access systems, video surveillance, and regular inspection by the Norwegian government, but the most effective security element is the location itself. The combination of Arctic geography, the requirement for a flight into Longyearbyen, and the logistical difficulty of moving anything substantial in or out of a facility at this location provides a level of protection that no urban-based security system can fully replicate. Number 8. Vatican Secret Archives Administrative Corps, Vatican City. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, renamed from Secret Archive in 2019, though the change was largely cosmetic in terms of access policy, covers approximately 85 linear kilometers of shelving spanning 12 centuries of church history, and the specific core sections holding the most sensitive historical materials are subject to access protocols that go considerably beyond the already restrictive standards applied to the archive as a whole. Approved researchers can request specific documents and have them brought to a reading room. They cannot browse the stacks, they cannot access the archive independently, and the request to delivery process for sensitive materials can take months. The most restricted sections of the collection include materials from the 20th century that have only been selectively opened in recent decades, including documents from the pontificate of Pius XII related to the Church's conduct during World War II, which were made available to researchers in 2020 and have been the subject of intensive historical study since. The Vatican's security apparatus, the Swiss Guard, the Vatican Gendarmerie, and the Vatican Security Services collectively manage access to Vatican City's entire territory, which covers approximately 0.44 square kilometers and has formal state status under the Lateran Treaty of 1929. The combination of state sovereignty, a centuries-old security tradition, and the sheer institutional weight of an organization that has been managing its own security for 2,000 years produces something more substantive than the tourist-facing image of guards in Renaissance costumes might suggest. Former Vatican archivist Cardinal Francesco Marchetti Salvagiani once described the archive's role as the memory of the Church, which must be protected as the Church protects its faith. The protection has been consistent. Number 7. Mezhgorye Closed City, Russia. Mezhgorye is a closed administrative territorial formation, the Russian government's term for a settlement whose access is restricted by federal law, located in the Republic of Bashkortostan in the southern Ural Mountains. It doesn't appear on most commercial maps. Foreign nationals are prohibited from entering without special permission that is functionally never granted, and the Russian government's official explanation for the restriction is maintenance of unspecified facilities and objects in the area. The specific unspecified object generating the most attention is Yamantau Mountain, which rises nearby and which satellite imagery, defector accounts, and congressional testimony from American intelligence officials in the 1990s collectively suggested was the site of an enormous construction project during the Soviet era. The theories about what was built inside Yamantau range from a nuclear command bunker capable of surviving a strategic first strike to massive underground storage facilities for weapons or government continuity infrastructure. Russian officials have offered varying and inconsistent explanations over the years, which is the kind of response that tends to sustain rather than resolve speculation. What can be confirmed is that Mezhgorye has a population of approximately 17,000 people, that it is served by dedicated infrastructure, including a rail connection and road access, and that the level of restriction applied to outside access significantly exceeds what would be required simply to protect a mining operation or a non-sensitive government facility. The security perimeter around the town and the surrounding mountain infrastructure is maintained by Russian federal forces, and the consequences for unauthorized entry are not the kind that encourage experimentation. Number 6. Dulce Lake Federal Protection Zone, New Mexico, USA. The area around Dulce Lake in northern New Mexico, near the town of Dulce on the Jicarilla Apache Nation Reservation, maintains federal and tribal land management restrictions that combine to create a zone of restricted access with an unusual mix of justifications. Dulce Lake and the surrounding wetlands are managed under federal environmental protection statutes, and the reservation land is subject to tribal sovereignty restrictions that apply to non-tribal visitors. The area gained notoriety beginning in the late 1970s due to allegations from local ranchers about unusual cattle mutilations and alleged government activity in the surrounding terrain, claims that circulated extensively in UFO research communities. The allegations were never substantiated, and the federal and tribal land management restrictions predate those claims entirely. But the combination of genuine restricted access and colorful speculation has given the area a disproportionate profile. The Jicarilla Apache Nation maintains its own tribal government and law enforcement, controls access to tribal land independently of federal oversight, and has consistently declined to treat its sovereign territory as a tourist destination for people curious about conspiracy theories. The federal wetland protections add another layer. The result is a genuinely restricted zone, with genuinely mundane explanations for the restrictions, sitting in a landscape that has been assigned considerably more mysterious significance than the actual access policies warrant. Number 5. Porton Down, Wiltshire, England. Porton Down is the common name for the UK's Defence Science and Technology Laboratory site in Wiltshire, which has operated as a chemical and biological defense research facility since 1916, making it the longest continuously operating military science installation of its type in the world. The facility began during World War I as a site for developing and testing chemical weapons for the British military, and its role has evolved through subsequent decades to focus on defense against chemical and biological threats, a distinction the Ministry of Defense maintains carefully. The security around Porton Down is substantial and has been continuously updated across more than a century of operation. The site covers roughly 7,000 acres, is surrounded by restricted land that creates a significant buffer zone around the working facility, and is monitored by security arrangements that the Ministry of Defense does not discuss in public. The facility came to significant public attention in 2018 when Sergei Skripal, a former Russian military intelligence officer, and his daughter were poisoned with the Novichok nerve agent in nearby Salisbury, and Porton Down scientists were responsible for identifying the specific agent used, a role that required the facility to rapidly communicate detailed technical conclusions to the public while simultaneously managing the security implications of that disclosure. Former Porton Down scientist and author Alistair Hay, who has written about chemical weapons history, noted in an interview that Porton Down's longevity means it carries institutional knowledge about chemical threats that no other facility in the world has accumulated over the same period, which is both a description of its scientific value and an implicit explanation of why the security around it has been maintained at the level it has for over a century. Number 4. Air Force One Maintenance Facility, Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland. Andrews Air Force Base, which was renamed Joint Base Andrews in 2009 following its merger with Naval Air Facility Washington, is home to the 89th Airlift Wing, the unit responsible for operating and maintaining Air Force One and the other VIP transport aircraft used by the President, Vice President, and other senior government officials. The facilities at Andrews dedicated to Air Force One maintenance and security represent one of the more comprehensively protected non-combat military facilities in the United States, for reasons that are straightforward. The aircraft is both the most visible symbol of American executive power and a critical component of continuity of government. Security around the Air Force One maintenance hangars and related facilities goes well beyond standard base security. The personnel who work on the aircraft undergo background investigations that significantly exceed standard military clearance requirements. The physical security of the hangars involves layers of access control, constant monitoring, and protocols for detecting tampering with any aircraft system that are considerably more intensive than what applies to other military aircraft, even of comparable strategic importance. The specific security protocols around Air Force One have never been published, and the Secret Service, which shares responsibility for the aircraft's protection with the Air Force, does not discuss them. Former Secret Service agent and author Dan Emmett, who served on the Presidential Protective Detail, has described the overall security environment around the President's aircraft as a system designed to assume every possible threat and build in a response before the threat materializes, which is a reasonable summary of the approach applied across the entire presidential protection infrastructure that the Air Force One facilities represent a critical node of. Number 3. Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station, Colorado, USA. Cheyenne Mountain Space Force Station, formerly NORAD's primary operational command center, sits inside a mountain south of Colorado Springs and was built between 1961 and 1966 at a cost of approximately $142 million, the equivalent of well over $1 billion today, to serve as a nuclear-hardened command center capable of surviving a direct nuclear strike and continuing to function. The facility houses its main operations halls on a system of more than 1,300 large springs, each weighing approximately 1,000 pounds, designed to absorb blast shock waves and allow the facility to continue operating during and after an attack. The access procedures for the facility begin at the surface with standard military perimeter security, a working military installation with the full range of access controls, and become considerably more involved as you move toward the operational core inside the mountain. The tunnel entrance is guarded at multiple checkpoints. The blast doors that protect the main tunnel are capable of withstanding enormous overpressure, and the facility's internal systems are designed to operate entirely independently of the outside power grid, water supply, and communications infrastructure for extended periods. NORAD shifted its primary day-to-day operations to Peterson Space Force Base in 2006 for practical efficiency reasons. But Cheyenne Mountain was not decommissioned. It was placed on warm standby, kept fully operational, and assigned to U.S. Northern Command as an alternate command center capable of resuming full operations within a very short time frame if necessary. The decision to keep Cheyenne Mountain in this state rather than closing it reflects a specific calculation about the continuing value of a facility that is hardened against electromagnetic pulse effects in a way that Peterson's above-ground facilities are not. It is arguably more secure today as a backup facility with full operational capability and reduced daily foot traffic than it was during its years of primary operation. Number 2. Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, Ohio, USA. The Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland receives considerably less attention than the New York Fed's Gold Vault 80 feet below Manhattan, but it operates one of the most comprehensively secured financial facilities in the United States for a specific reason. It serves as one of the primary currency processing and destruction facilities for the Federal Reserve System, handling enormous volumes of currency, both current and withdrawn, in ways that require security measures designed around the assumption that the materials being handled are among the most targeted commodities on Earth. The facility processes hundreds of millions of dollars in currency daily, authenticating bills, sorting damaged notes for destruction, and managing the physical flow of Federal Reserve notes through a system that requires absolute chain of custody documentation at every stage. The destruction of damaged currency, which the Fed does literally by shredding, requires the same level of physical security as the storage or transport of intact currency, since partially destroyed notes could potentially be reconstituted or used as evidence in counterfeiting operations. The security architecture of Federal Reserve facilities in general, and Cleveland's in particular, incorporates armed law enforcement, extensive surveillance systems, physical barriers substantially more serious than standard commercial building security, and protocols for currency transport that involve coordination with multiple law enforcement agencies. The Fed's own police force, the Federal Reserve Police, is a statutory law enforcement agency with arrest powers trained to standards comparable to other federal law enforcement bodies. The Cleveland facility is not publicly accessible beyond the Fed's educational programming, and the operational areas where currency processing occurs are not part of any public tour under any circumstances. Number 1. Iron Mountain Data Vaults, Western Pennsylvania, USA. Iron Mountain's facility in Boyers, Pennsylvania, occupies an underground limestone mine that covers approximately 1.5 million square feet beneath the Allegheny Mountains. Roughly 220 acres of underground space in a former limestone cavern that has been converted, over more than 70 years of operation, into one of the most secure private archival facilities on Earth. The facility stores an extraordinary range of materials: original master recordings of musical artists, film negatives, corporate records, government documents, financial records, and personal data from millions of individuals. Materials for which the clients have determined that no above-ground storage solution offers adequate protection. The facility stores materials for clients including major film studios. The original negatives of some of the most significant films in cinema history are kept there. major record labels, major banks, and an uncertain number of government agencies and private organizations that do not publicize their use of the facility. Iron Mountain does not publish a client list, and the terms of its storage agreements generally include confidentiality provisions that prevent clients from disclosing the relationship publicly. The physical security of the Boyers facility incorporates the limestone mountain itself as the primary protective structure. The cave environment provides natural temperature and humidity stability, protection from above-ground natural disasters, and the basic physical security of being underground and accessible only through controlled entry points. Those entry points are equipped with security measures, including armed guards, access control systems, and monitoring infrastructure that Iron Mountain does not describe publicly. The facility has its own dedicated power supply and water systems. Former Rolling Stones guitarist Keith Richards once visited Iron Mountain's facility to review original master recording tapes stored there and reportedly described the experience as visiting a bank that stores music, which is an accurate description of the general atmosphere, if perhaps underselling the scale. These places prove that the most serious security in the world isn't always wearing camouflage. Sometimes it's wearing a 3-foot steel door and 20 feet of solid granite. If you found this one worth your time, hit like and subscribe. There's more where this came from.